LJN published A Nightmare on Elm Street, the game based on the 1984 Wes Craven slasher that featured everyone's favorite sleep villain, Freddy Krueger. The movie also gave a young Johnny Depp his first acting credit. Fun fact. If you've not seen the movie A Nightmare on Elm Street, you should. It's a classic that continues to feed into pop culture even today. If you somehow missed it, the spoiler-free synopsis is that Freddy Krueger infiltrates the dreams of teenagers and kills them in reality. Turns out, the lead character Nancy's parents are keeping a dark secret which is a clue to unraveling this terrifying snooze murderer's backstory. Krueger, played by Robert Englund, is simply terrifying in every way. He invades your subconscious while you sleep, you're not immune to his terrors by living in a nice neighborhood such as Elm Street, he has metal claws, a fleshless face, and a bad taste in sweaters. If you're an 80s lover like I clearly am, A Nightmare on Elm Street should be atop your stack of VHS Halloween hits collection. But we're all here for the game, not the movie. Why don't you rest your eyes for a bit? Go ahead, close them. Let's see what's up with A Nightmare on Elm Street. Unlike, say, Friday the 13th for the NES, A Nightmare on Elm Street is relatively straightforward. Relatively. To start, if you have the NES 4-score or satellite, you can play with up to 4 players, otherwise you can choose to play with 1 or 2. You start out on a 2D Elm Street and you can move left and right down the street. There are buildings in the backdrop, but you can't go into just any old building. It's close to midnight after all, so you can't expect them all to be open. And watch out for critters. You'll have to punch out bats, snakes, and other nightly predators on your way down the street. There's likely an optimal order for entering the buildings, but you'll only be allowed to enter certain ones at first. The reward for making it through those buildings, which are essentially the different stages in the game, are keys for entering the remaining buildings on the street that you couldn't already access. So, pop into a building and get going. Before we go any further, you'll notice a few meters up top, and these are pretty important. Each meter represents a different player's sleep level, or rather, alertness. If the meter runs all the way down, you go to sleep and the world changes for the worse. The environment is more sinister, the enemies are tougher. You'll remain in this world essentially asleep and vulnerable to Freddy until you find something that will wake you up like a cup of coffee or a radio. Finding these items when you're not asleep will boost your sleep meter a bit, essentially giving you energy. If Freddy catches up to you here because you don't find a waker-upper in time, you'll have to fight him off until you do wake up. If you're playing multiplayer and any of your characters fall asleep, the whole party goes into the dream world. It's the game's way of encouraging the players to be active and efficient. Even standing still for too long will lull your character to sleep quicker. Okay, so back to your goal. Each building you enter contains a number of Freddy's bones hidden around, and it's your job to collect the bones while dodging and dispatching the many enemies. In general, the enemies aren't too bad to either avoid or defeat, and moving and maneuvering your character actually felt better than I expected it to. There are a few tough jumps in the game resulting in cheap deaths, but sometimes there's a better way to get to wherever you're jumping to. Anyway, you can't exit the stage until you find all the bones, and you can tell how many you need by the counter in the top middle. Once all the bones are picked up, you can advance. Eventually you'll get to a boss, which is usually some heinous figure with Freddy's face on it. It's time we talked about the Dream Warriors. Dream Warriors? Yeah, so this game evidently covers at least the first 3 films. The third film in the franchise, released in 1987, was called A Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors. In this movie, the teens, seeking to defend themselves against a vengeful Krueger, band together to defeat him by training themselves on how to control their own dreams. So anyway, Dream Warriors in this game come in pretty handy in the dream world. There are 3 different Dream Warrior icons you can pick up along the way. There's the Shadow Warrior, the Necromancer, and the Acrobat, each with their own unique abilities. You can even collect all 3 and switch between them as you defend yourself in the dream world by pressing select to cycle through. The Shadow Warrior is fast and can throw shurikens, the Acrobat is nimble and can throw a javelin, and the Necromancer can cast fire magic. The biggest bummer in the game is that once you do wake back up, you're weaker because you don't have the Dream Warriors anymore. There were times I wanted to go to the more difficult dream world just so I could use my quicker, more agile, and honestly more fun to fight with Dream Warriors than my teenage fist-wielding base character. So the general flow of the game is 1. Go down Elm Street and enter wherever you can, 2. Collect all the bones to advance, and 3. Fight a Freddy boss at the end to get a key, and repeat at the next building. And again, at some point you'll fall asleep and enter the dream world, but it's typically not too bad to survive it. The game is somewhat generous with lives and health. You can take about 4 hits before dying, and of course falling in pits are instant deaths. In all, you have 5 lives per continue and 3 continues to survive the 7 different levels in the game, which take you between a few houses, to a junkyard with piled up clunkers, a graveyard where you'll use bubbles as platforms, and eventually the high school where you'll get to a boss rush before the final showdown with old Freddy himself. The music here is okay. You're not going to hum it while you wash dishes or anything, but as this game was developed by Rare, the soundtrack was actually composed by David Wise, of Donkey Kong Country fame. All in all, the game isn't terrible. The recipe is simple, it's a beat-em-up/collectathon. The boss fights are what really amp up the difficulty here, but the way the Dream Warriors are utilized in the game does add an unexpected element here that kicks the entire experience up a notch. It's a tough one, but with a little practice and learning what to expect, it's certainly beatable for most folks. I'd say give this one a try this Halloween if you're looking for a challenge that isn't as spooky as it is just okay. There have only ever been 2 video games based on the A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. The other was developed by Westwood Associates for the Commodore 64 and plays more like a top-down, gauntlet-inspired game. It's a completely different experience from the NES game. Well, that does it for A Nightmare on Elm Street on the NES. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock the door. 5, 6, get your crucifix. 7, 8, gonna stay up late. 9, 10, never sleep again. And 11, 12. Thanks for watching.